He built the company. That's what he tells everyone. My dad, visionary entrepreneur, self-made man. He loves that story. Loves it so much that he's told it on stage, at investor luncheons, in glossy feature interviews where he's smiling under a headline like, "Legacy Leader Takes Tech Firm to the Top." But here's what none of those articles say. He never wrote a line of code. Never stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging firmware or rewriting failed protocols. He didn't design the product. He didn't pitch it. He didn't even believe in it, until it made money. And yet, somehow, when the money came in, so did the lies. And I went from brilliant daughter to just the COO. Like all those nights, all those patents, all those billion-dollar ideas were some kind of secretarial work. So I did the one thing no one saw coming. I walked out. With the real value of the company in my hands, the tech I invented, the IP I built, and the vision he never truly understood. I left him his ego, his desk, and his crumbling shell of a company. And then I built something better, bigger, smarter, my own empire. Now he watches from the sidelines, while reporters who once called me his right hand, now call me the one who outgrew the throne. Welcome to Judgy Tales, where real stories collide with drama, betrayal, and unapologetic justice. If you're new here, we don't sugarcoat. We tell the kinds of stories that make you gasp, get mad, and maybe, just maybe, cheer a little when karma finally shows up. Every week, we break down twisted family dynamics, workplace betrayals, and personal revolutions that go way beyond petty drama. And today's story, it's not just about business. It's about a father who couldn't let go of control, a daughter who was underestimated, dismissed, and quietly cut out of the legacy she helped create. It's about pride, power, and the mistake that arrogant men make when they assume loyalty means silence. You want to talk about family business? Let's talk about how I took mine and made it mine alone. Because here's the thing about people like my father. They want the credit without the grind. They want to own the story, even if they weren't there when it was written. But legacy isn't inherited. It's earned. So, when he decided I was just the COO, after years of being the only one actually building the tech, writing the patents, running operations while he played golf with investors, I realized something very simple. I didn't have to keep building someone else's kingdom. Not when I already held the keys to my own. What came next? Oh, trust me. It wasn't polite. It wasn't pretty. But it was powerful. Stick around. Because this story, it only gets better from here. I never thought I'd ever see my own name on a patent application, let alone as the sole inventor. Growing up, I never really craved that kind of recognition. I didn't dream of fame or power. All I ever wanted was respect, especially from my father. But in our house, respect wasn't given. It was rationed like oxygen on a failing spacecraft. And my older brother, he breathed it in like he owned the damn air. My name is Darren. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in suburban Chicago, the middle child in a textbook type A family. My dad, Richard, is, or was, a tech visionary, a brilliant engineer in his youth. He founded a small startup back in the early 2000s out of our garage, the classic American dream. He loved to talk about how he bootstrapped it with nothing but a soldering iron, a whiteboard, and guts. And yeah, in fairness, he did build something impressive. That garage startup eventually became Tech Solutions, a company that specialized in industrial IoT hardware and data-optimized firmware. We weren't exactly Apple, but we were profitable, consistently, and we were known in the space for one key asset, our proprietary remote diagnostics algorithm, the one Dad named R-Core. R for Richard, of course. My mom, Elizabeth, was the quiet glue holding it all together. She passed away when I was 19, just after my first year at MIT. Cancer. Fast and cruel. Her absence became a kind of gravitational void that warped everything in our family. Dad became colder, more business-obsessed, and my older brother, Tom, drifted even further into the role of golden child. Tom is 2 years older than me and, frankly, the reason I even went into engineering in the first place. As kids, he always got the new toys first, robot kits, Legos, Raspberry Pis. I'd watch him tinker with them, fail, get frustrated, then toss them aside. I'd pick them up, finish building them, and bring them back to life. Tom had the spark but not the stamina. I had the patience but not the pedestal. Classic sibling dichotomy. After my tea, I didn't take the six-figure offers from Google or Tesla. I turned them down because, at the time, Dad asked me to join our tech. I was young, maybe even naive, but the idea of working alongside my father to build something lasting, that felt meaningful. So I came home. And to his credit, he did put me to work, real work. I wasn't fetching coffee or shadowing meetings. I was deep in the product development side of things. Firmware, architecture, testing, optimization. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. And when we hit technical roadblocks, I was the one pulling the long nights, doing the diagnostics, debugging line by line until the code sang. Over the next 10 years, I rose through the ranks. Not because I was the boss's son, but despite it. I made breakthroughs in power management that reduced our device consumption by 18%. I restructured our code base to handle modular deployments across different industries. I co-designed the second iteration of our core, the same one that landed us a 7-figure contract with a logistics giant. That deal alone kept the lights on through the 2020 pandemic. Eventually, I became the COO, Chief Operating Officer. And while some people thought that was just a ceremonial title, I wore that role like armor. I was in charge of operations, product timelines, implementation, vendor relationships, client onboarding, internal teams, everything. But in meetings, I was still Rick's kid. In press releases, my name was left off. And whenever someone mentioned strategy or innovation, the credit inevitably drifted to Tom, the CFO, who mostly just reviewed spreadsheets and tried to talk like he understood tech. Because here's the thing, Tom was never the engineer. He studied finance. He interned at a boutique hedge fund. When Dad brought him in as CFO, it made sense on paper. But in practice, it was a disaster. Tom didn't understand development cycles, and he treated R&D budgets like slush funds to be slashed. He once suggested we cut QA testing by 30% to improve our short-term cash flow. That's the kind of thinking that tanks products, or worse, gets someone killed in industrial applications. But somehow, whenever I brought up concerns, Dad would wave me off. They're just growing pains, he'd say. You and Tom have different strengths. Except his strengths never once contributed to a product launch. It got worse in private. When I'd offer ideas for restructuring our dev flow or expanding into adjacent markets, Dad would listen, nod, and then send Tom to look into it. When I protested, he told me point blank, "You're just the CEO, Darren. You handle ops. Let Tom handle the vision." That moment, that exact sentence, was like a slow knife twisting behind my ribs. Just the COO. Was that really how he saw me? After a decade of blood, code, and caffeine, I was just a glorified project manager in his eyes. Still I stayed. Because I believed in the product. I believed in the team we'd built. Our engineers trusted me. Our clients respected me. And deep down, I foolishly believed that one day, Dad would finally see me as his equal. Not his son. Not his underling. Just a fellow builder. That illusion shattered the day I discovered what they were planning. I was reviewing next quarter's cap table, routine stuff, when I saw a new holding company listed as a 12% stakeholder. I traced it back and realized it was owned by Tom. Not as part of his CFO compensation. Not as part of a standard equity agreement. This was something extra, hidden, quiet. I dug deeper, and what I found made my stomach turn. Tom had filed provisional patents, under his own name, on an algorithm I had written 6 months prior. A variation of our core, adapted for real-time load prediction in smart factories. A project I had pitched, developed, tested, and deployed with zero input from him. I took the document straight to Dad, furious, expecting him to be just as outraged. But he barely flinched. "He's protecting company assets," Dad said, not even looking up from his screen. "Company assets. That's my code, Dad. I wrote every line." "Maybe so, but you did it here. Under our tech. That means it belongs to the company." "No," I said, trying to stay calm. It means it belongs to you. You're using Tom to lock me out of my own work. He leaned back, his voice flat. Darren, this is business. Not everything is about fairness. You're the CEO. You're not the visionary. And there it was again. That damn word. Just the COO. I walked out of that office shaking. Not with fear, but with clarity. For the first time I saw the truth. I was never going to be seen. Not by him. Not in this company. Because in Dad's eyes, Tom was the heir. And I was just the help. So I made a decision. I didn't scream. I didn't quit on the spot. I did something better. I went home, opened my encrypted backups and pulled out the codebase. My version. Not the one I had given the company. The one I'd built in parallel during my off hours, the one I'd improved in secret, the one I had documented meticulously, with timestamps, logs, and machine learning models entirely separate from Tekka's infrastructure. Because while Tom was busy schmoozing with board members and Dad was preaching loyalty, I had been doing what I always did. Building. And this time I wasn't building for them. I didn't sleep the night I saw my name erased from my own work. I sat at my kitchen table, lights off, laptop screen glowing like a cold moon in the dark. My eyes flicked between legal documents, Git commit histories, and patent filings, each one confirming what I already knew. They were stealing from me. Legally. Quietly. Completely. But what kept me awake wasn't just the betrayal. It was the planning. The precision of it. Tom hadn't just filed the patents. He'd done it strategically. Right after the board finalized the expansion initiative. Right after we hired 2 new enterprise clients based on the technology I'd built. It wasn't just theft. It was a hostile maneuver to push me out. To rewrite the origin story of our company's next evolution. Without me in it. That's when the paranoia crept in. How long had this been in the works? Weeks. Months. Had Dad always seen me as a placeholder? Someone to carry the company through its growth phase until Tom was ready to lead? And worse. How many other people in the company knew? The next morning I walked into the office like nothing happened. I greeted the front desk receptionist. I nodded at the engineers, smiled at the devs, asked about deadlines and bugs. I knew I was walking through a building that no longer respected me, but they didn't know that I knew. Not yet. At 10 a.m. we had our weekly executive sync. Normally it was a perfunctory update call. 30 minutes of status checks and strategy briefs. But this one was different. I could feel it in the air. Tom walked in wearing a smug half-grin, tapping away on his phone. Dad was already seated, unusually stoic. When I sat down, they exchanged a quick glance. Let's get started, Dad said. The agenda started with normal chatter, Q2 projections, supply chain bottlenecks, beta client feedback. I played along, even offered some tweaks to the deployment schedule for our new line of modular units. But then, about 20 minutes in, Dad dropped the bomb. We're restructuring the C-suite, he said, like he was reading a grocery list. And blinked. Restructuring how? Tom will step into a dual role as CFO and interim CEO for the next phase of the company's transition. My chest locked. Transition to what, exactly? Tom cleared his throat and leaned forward, rehearsed and smug. To a more investor-aligned structure. We're preparing for strategic acquisition interest. And the board believes that combining executive roles will streamline negotiations. I stared at them. So, I'm being demoted. Dad shook his head. No. You'll remain so, of course. But your focus will shift strictly to internal operations. No more product oversight or development strategy. That'll fall under Tom's purview going forward. There it was again. The line they kept repeating. Just the COO. I looked at Tom, who tried to keep his poker face but was clearly basking in the power shift. I could see it in the way he held his shoulders, in the false humility dripping from every word. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice ice. You're handing over vision, leadership, and decision-making to someone who's never written a single line of code, never spent a night in the lab, and who just weeks ago tried to kill QA testing because it wasn't lean? Tom's smirk faltered, but Dad spoke first. This isn't about code, Darren. It's about leadership. You're too emotionally tied to the product. That's not scalable. Tom has the clarity we need. I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind of bitter, disbelieving laugh that bubbles up when the surreal finally turns real. You're right, I said. I am emotionally tied. 'Cause I built it. Because without me, there wouldn't be a product. Dad leaned forward. That's exactly the problem. You think you're the only reason this company exists. But it's my name on the articles of incorporation. My IP that started this. And my judgment that says it's time to move forward without ego. I locked eyes with him. And my code that got you through the pandemic. My algorithm that landed you the 10-year freight contract. My model that brought the product into Industry 4.0. Silence. Finally Tom chimed in. You're making this personal, Darren. I turned to him slowly. It became personal the moment you filed a patent under your name for work you didn't even understand. That landed. His jaw clenched, and for a flicker of a second I saw fear. He hadn't expected me to find out. Dad stood up, signaling the meeting was over. We've made our decision. Either get on board or step aside. And just like that they left me sitting there stunned. I wasn't fired. I wasn't even demoted officially. I was simply erased, bit by bit, decision by decision, until there would be nothing left but a job title and a vague legacy they'd rewrite without me. I went back to my office and shut the door. I stared out the window for a long time, watching cars glide past on the highway, tiny and irrelevant, just like me in their eyes. But inside, something cracked open. No more begging. No more explaining. No more waiting for recognition that would never come. That night I began the extraction. I didn't take anything illegal. I didn't copy RTech servers or steal client lists. What I did take was mine. Every note, every sketch, every simulation I'd created on my own time, on my own devices, and saved in my own cloud. My independent IP. The version of the algorithm I had improved well beyond the one RTech was still clumsily deploying. I worked in silence for 3 weeks. I showed up to work, nodded, smiled, played the game. But after hours I was building, truly building. Not for a board. Not for a father. Not for a legacy that saw me as disposable. I called it chirometrics. A new kind of platform. Not just diagnostic but predictive. Using time series AI models to anticipate system failures before they even emerged. It was sleek, elegant, and 10 times more powerful than our core. And this time every line was mine. By week 4 I gave my 2 weeks notice. No shouting. No confrontation. I handed Dad my resignation in an envelope and watched his face twitch as he read it. You're walking away, he asked. He nodded. You already pushed me out. I'm just making it official. What are you going to do? I looked him square in the eye. Build. What I should have been allowed to build years ago. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't even wish me luck. Tom barely acknowledged it. He made a passive-aggressive comment in my exit interview about how loyalty isn't always scalable either. I didn't respond. On my last day, I left behind my badge, my keys, and an entire folder of documentation that would keep RTech afloat for 6 more months. Not because I owed them, but because I wasn't going to sink to their level. But I did take one last step before I walked out. I filed a formal IP ownership challenge through my lawyer, citing independent development and time-stamped evidence showing that my improvements to our core were created outside of Verteca's infrastructure. It wasn't just petty. It was a move of protection. And it sent a message. You don't get to erase me. That's when the war truly began. 2 weeks later, I launched Chirometrics in beta. I reached out to a few quiet clients, people I'd worked with over the years who trusted me more than the RTech brand. I didn't badmouth my father. I didn't burn bridges. I just said, try this. It's faster, smarter, cheaper. Within a month, 5 enterprise clients signed letters of intent. RTech noticed. Suddenly, I got a cease and desist from their in-house counsel claiming I had violated company IP. My lawyer responded with a 50-page rebuttal including timestamps, development logs, and testimony from colleagues who had seen me testing the core models on my personal equipment outside of company time. The cease and desist was quietly dropped. But now they were desperate. And when desperate people panic, they get sloppy. Artec pushed out a rushed update to our core version 3.0. A version based on my original concept but rebuilt by a team who didn't understand its architecture. Broke. Badly. One of their logistics clients experienced a 36-hour outage due to a firmware mismatch. Meanwhile, Chirometrics was flying. We signed a government contract. We hired a dream team of engineers, people who wanted to build, not just collect checks. We moved into a small, scrappy office above a coffee shop. I gave every employee equity. Transparent, fair, earned. And the press. They caught wind. Son of Artec founder launches rival startup. And it's winning. My father didn't call. But Tom did. He wanted to meet. Said it was just to talk. Said there were ways we could work together. I met him for coffee. Let him pitch. He talked about synergy, about merging the IP, about repairing the family brand. When he was done, I looked at him and said, "You still don't get it. I don't want your brand. I am my brand now." He didn't respond. He just nodded, stood up and left. That night I filed the final patent. Not just for the platform, but for the engine that powered it. The thing that made Chirometrics more than a product. It made it a movement. I didn't build this empire out of spite. I built it out of survival. Because when you grow up being told you're just anything, just the second son, just the operator, just the support, you either believe it, or you break the mold. Broke it. And I'm never going back. I thought I had seen the worst of it. Thought I'd absorbed every betrayal they could possibly throw at me. Thought the wounds were old enough to stop bleeding. I was wrong. 3 months into Chirometrics' launch, we were already ahead of every projection. We'd secured 7 clients, our revenue was doubling month over month, and we just closed a deal with a multinational manufacturing group that previously worked exclusively with our tech. It wasn't just a win, it was a statement. I still remember the day the press picked it up. Exo's startup eats Roteka's lunch. Family feud fuels Silicon Valley shakeup. It went viral on LinkedIn. A dozen messages flooded my inbox. From former co-workers, college friends, even investors I'd once pitched while under my dad's thumb. Suddenly, I wasn't just the guy behind the scenes. I was the scene. The one they had underestimated, silenced, and dismissed. And that's when it happened. That's when my father declared war. Started quietly. An anonymous source tipped off a journalist that Chirometrics had allegedly violated trade secrets. Then another story broke. A lawsuit filed by Artec against me personally, not just the company, alleging misappropriation of IP, breach of fiduciary duty, and violation of non-compete clauses. It was shocking not because of the legal action. This was business and I expected pushback, but because of who signed the complaint. Not my father. On page 5 of the filing, buried in legalese, was a shocking claim that Artec had registered our core version 3.5, not only as proprietary software, but that I had agreed in writing to transfer all derivative works built during my time as COO, including external prototypes. Froze. I never signed that. I was sure of it. I tore through old contracts, scanned emails, called my attorney in a panic. We reviewed every document, clause by clause, until we found it. A file dated December 12, 2021. PDF with my signature. It was a revised executive contract, a performance adjustment memo. The kind of thing HR slips you when you're too busy to read every footnote. Looked routine. Just a bonus structure update. But buried in the middle was one line that changed everything. Employee agrees to assign any derivative innovations built in relation to core company assets to Artec Solutions. Effective retroactively. One sentence. Hidden in a stack of standard HR fluff. And I had signed it, blindly, during the 2021 supply crisis when I was pulling 80-hour weeks just to keep production lines running. They got me. And the worst part. My father was behind it. He knew exactly what he was doing. He'd laid the trap, buried the clause, waited until I was exhausted, distracted, loyal. He waited for me to become vulnerable. That was the real betrayal. Because while the lawsuit was filed by the board, the move itself, the contract trickery, the legal ambush, it bore only one signature of intent, my father's. And I wasn't the only one reeling. 2 days later, our lead engineer at Chirometrics, Miguel, someone who had followed me from Artec, got a call from an Artec recruiter. They offered him double his current salary and a full relocation package if he'd come home. When he declined, they called again. Then they called his wife. Then they sent an anonymous email suggesting he was risking his visa by working with a company under investigation. This wasn't just business. This was warfare. And it didn't stop there. A week later, our staging server was hit with a DDoS attack. Nothing sophisticated, but enough to interrupt client demos. A phishing campaign targeted our internal Slack with fake employee logins. Our business insurance premiums suddenly spiked due to a pending legal review. Someone had flagged to our provider. They were trying to bleed us out. Force us to settle. To fold. To run back to the old man and beg for forgiveness. But I don't break. Build. I gathered my team. Sat them down. Told them everything. The lawsuit. The pressure. The risk. And then I told them the plan. We were going on the offensive. First, I authorized my legal team to countersue. Not just for wrongful claim, but for fraudulent contractual entrapment. We'd built a strong case around coercion, asymmetrical power dynamics, and strategic obfuscation. We had time-stamped documents proving that the core innovations of Chirometrics were developed well after the contract, on separate systems, using methodologies not even conceived by Artec. But that was just the legal side. The real blow came from what I dropped next. Remember that logistics client I helped land at Artec before I left? The one whose entire smart freight infrastructure depended on predictive diagnostics. Well, they'd been struggling. Artec's newest firmware updates were riddled with bugs, and their support team had no idea how to patch the system. So I offered them something bold. Full migration. For free. No strings attached. We'd rebuild their diagnostics on the Chirometrics platform, even help them retrain their staff and reformat their analytics stack. They agreed. We executed the migration in under 3 weeks, and the results were undeniable. Downtime dropped by 80%. Forecast accuracy jumped by 22%. Their operations team publicly posted a LinkedIn article praising our team, with a quote that would haunt Artec's brand for years. We didn't just switch providers. We upgraded to people who understood what they were building. The industry saw it. So did Artec's board. And that's when the twist hit me like a freight train. 2 weeks after the article went live, I got an unexpected email. Not from Tom. Not from a lawyer. From Cynthia Albright, a longtime board member at Artec, someone I barely knew beyond a few brief encounters in conference rooms. Her message was short. We need to talk. Confidential. Urgent. Agreed. We met at a private co-working lounge in downtown Chicago. She arrived early, dressed sharply as always, but her posture was different. Less corporate, more human. Darren, she said, this stays between us. For now. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were internal memos, email transcripts, and board minutes. My heart thudded as I read them. Tom had gone rogue. According to the documents, he had convinced my father to streamline control over Artec's IP portfolio by secretly incorporating a shadow subsidiary, RT Holdings LLC, into which he funneled patents, licensing rights, and even capital contributions. The board had no idea, until the Chirometrics lawsuit opened the books. And the most shocking part, my father wasn't even in full control anymore. He had been slowly manipulated, gently edged out of decisions by Tom's efficiency plans and delegated trusts. Tom now had power of attorney over several divisions. And worse, he was in talks with a foreign firm to sell core Artec assets, including our core, to a private buyer in Shanghai. Cynthia looked me dead in the eyes. If you drop the lawsuit, she said, Artec will die quietly in the hands of people who don't even understand what they're buying. Felt sick. Not just because of what Tom had done, but because my father let him. He chose him over me, I whispered. Cynthia nodded softly. He didn't just choose wrong. He lost control. And now, only you have the credibility and leverage to stop it. So that was the real twist. The betrayal wasn't just that they tried to erase me. The real betrayal was that they burned the entire company down in the process. And now they needed the same son they dismissed, sued, and tried to silence, to save the very empire they tried to keep him out of. It was a choice I never thought I'd face. Let the house my father built collapse in fire, or walk back inside and try to pull out the blueprints from the ash. I left that meeting with Cynthia Albright feeling like I had just walked out of a burning building and realized I was holding the fire hose the whole time. Everything they had done to me, every lie, every betrayal, every twisted legal clause, was now ricocheting back toward them full speed. But what made it different this time was that now I had the power. And I wasn't going to waste it. Let's be clear. This wasn't about revenge. Not entirely. This wasn't about sticking it to my father or humiliating Tom. This was about taking back the narrative. For years, I had been working in the shadows of men who believed their titles made them untouchable. Men who thought controlling the narrative meant owning the truth. But now the curtain had dropped, and they were standing in front of the world, naked and exposed. I knew I had to act fast. Tom was still in control on paper. The board was still too fragmented to oust him outright, and my father was no longer the decision-maker. Just a figurehead clinging to the illusion that his words still carried weight. So I began the endgame. Step 1. Strategic exposure. I reached out to the journalist who had originally covered our story. Miles Weaver, a tech reporter who loved family feuds more than IPO filings. I gave him one hell of a scoop. Internal memos, board minutes, and leaked emails that proved Tom had funneled core Artec assets into a shell company, all without full board approval. I even gave him the name of the foreign buyer he was negotiating with, along with the license terms that would have effectively turned Artec into a zombie brand, a puppet front for offshore production with zero innovation left inside. The article dropped 2 days later with a headline that made my phone light up like it was New Year's Eve. Power play or betrayal. CFO of Artec secretly moves IP to foreign buyer, risks legacy brand. It was devastating. Within 24 hours, Artec's LinkedIn comments were flooded with clients demanding answers. Stockholders, yes, even in our mid-cap private market, started asking for emergency meetings. 3 major enterprise clients suspended active projects pending IP assurance. Even Tom's golden boy image shattered overnight. Step 2. Legal leverage. My legal team filed an injunction to pause the sale of any Artec IP assets until a forensic audit could be completed. We weren't just fighting the initial lawsuit anymore. We were flipping the entire courtroom on its head. We petitioned for discovery rights, demanding access to internal correspondence, accounting records, and legal documents pertaining to RT Holdings LLC and its relation to Artec Solutions. Tom's legal team scrambled. They tried to deflect, delay, claim executive privilege. But they had no idea what was coming. 'Cause step 3. That was personal. I had been quiet about one detail, something I had buried deep in my archives, never expecting I'd need to use it. 2 years before I left Artec, during a particularly rough stretch in our R&D department, Tom had insisted we cut costs by outsourcing part of our code base to a third-party firm in Eastern Europe. I was against it. I voiced every objection I could. Security risks, code ownership concerns, lack of NDA enforcement. But he overruled me. So I kept receipts, emails, file transfer logs, Slack screenshots, and most importantly, a private audit I had commissioned through a friend in cybersecurity. Someone who flagged that parts of the code Tom had approved were direct clones of open-source frameworks that violated our commercial licensing agreements. And guess what? Those cloned segments made it into the final build of RCore 3.5. The same version Artec was still selling. The one tied to the lawsuit they filed against me. So now they weren't just accusing me of IP theft. They were exposed for selling tainted software with licensing violations that could get them blacklisted from every major enterprise compliance chain in North America. I delivered all of this to the court. Publicly. The judge didn't just freeze their suit. He authorized a full third-party audit of Arteca's code, supply chain, and corporate filings. That's when the panic hit them. Clients began jumping ship. One by one. Not because I begged them to, but because they saw the truth. Because the trust they had in Artec had been built on the illusion of stability. But illusions don't survive when the walls cave in. Meanwhile, Chirometrics. We were booming. We launched our version 2.0 ahead of schedule. Fully compliant, cloud-native, and driven by a machine learning module 10 times smarter than our core's fragile shell. I started getting invitations to speak at conferences, to join panels, to headline innovation summits. But that wasn't the satisfying part. The real satisfaction came when I got a phone call I never expected. It was my father. He didn't sound angry or cold. He sounded tired. Like a man who had just watched the walls of his castle crumble while the prince he'd exiled now wore the crown. I read the article, he said. I said nothing. I didn't know about Shanghai. Or the shell company. Didn't you? Yes. Not accusing. Just done. There was silence on the line for a long time. Then he said something I never thought I'd hear. I should have listened to you. Those 6 words should have healed something. Closed a wound. Given me peace. But they didn't. 'Cause they came too late. Told him so. You didn't just ignore me, I said. You weaponized me. You took everything I gave you and handed it to someone who didn't even understand what it meant. Then when I finally stood up for myself, you let him come after me like I was the enemy. I was trying to protect the company, he muttered. No, I said. You were trying to protect your pride. Silence again. Then, what happens now? And here it was. The moment of decision. The final hand. I could destroy them. Let the company collapse. Let the lawsuits bleed them out. Let the audits tear them down brick by brick. But that's not what I wanted. Because despite everything, Artec wasn't just their legacy. It was mine too. So I made a decision. A month later I walked into the Artec boardroom. Not as a COO, not as a son, but as the CEO of their biggest rival. The atmosphere was tense. My father was there. So was Tom. His face pale, jaw clenched, completely dethroned. The rest of the board looked like they were bracing for impact. I handed them a proposal. Full acquisition. Chirometrics would buy Artec. Not for its products which were obsolete or its leadership which was done, but for its contracts, talent, and remaining brand recognition. We'd absorb their assets, retain only the teams that still mattered, and retire the Arcor name once and for all. The price. Lower than they'd ever imagined. Fair. My father looked at me with something close to disbelief. Why would you do this? Because I want to build something clean, I said. And the only way to do that is to burn the old mess to the ground and start over. My way. He nodded, defeated. And what happens to me? Shrug. You'll keep your name in the history books. But not in the future ones. Tom. He didn't speak. He just stood, grabbed his things and walked out of the room. The board voted. Unanimously. The deal went through. Artec was no more. And Chirometrics. We didn't just inherit a company. We buried an empire built on ego and replaced it with something smarter, leaner, and human. I gave every retained Artec employee a choice. Stay and help us build something new, or leave with dignity and a severance check. 90% stayed. Because they weren't loyal to a name. They were loyal to vision. And this time they knew who was holding it. People like to say business isn't personal. That work is work and family is family. But anyone who's ever built something alongside people they love knows that's a lie. Business is personal when it's your name on the line, your ideas in the pipeline, your blood in the code. When it's family, it's more than personal, it's primal. I didn't walk away from my father's company because I wanted revenge. I didn't take back my intellectual property and start Chirometrics because I wanted to make a point. I did it because I had to. Because staying meant erasing myself. It meant swallowing pride, suffocating potential, and accepting a role that was never mine to begin with. But when I look back, what haunts me most isn't what they did. It's what I let happen. For years, I accepted that being just the CEO was enough. I told myself that being essential behind the scenes was honorable. That as long as the machine worked, it didn't matter who got the credit. I told myself the story so many of us tell ourselves when we're afraid to step into the spotlight. I don't need recognition. I just need the results to speak for themselves. But silence isn't strength. And humility, when weaponized by the wrong people, becomes complicity. The truth is, my father didn't betray me the day he handed my title to my brother. That was just the final nail. The real betrayal was quieter. It was years of diminishing glances. Of telling me not yet. Of calling me support operator infrastructure. Never visionary, never creator, never leader. It was the way he applauded Tom for thinking big, while calling my attention to detail obsessive. It was the way he praised me in private, but dismissed me in front of the board. It was the way he taught me everything about building machines but nothing about building myself. So when I finally walked away, when I left behind the company I helped grow from a garage project to a multi-million-dollar tech operation, I wasn't just leaving a job, I was stepping into my own story for the first time. And that's what this whole thing has been about. Not patents, not lawsuits, not market share, but ownership, owning my work, owning my value, owning my voice. There's something profoundly dangerous about building in someone else's shadow, especially when that shadow wears your last name. Because you grow up believing that love and loyalty are the same thing. That being a good son means being silent. That questioning the family legacy is betrayal. But legacy should be earned, not inherited. And love. Love shouldn't require you to become invisible. People ask me now if I feel vindicated. Must feel good, they say, proving them wrong. And sure, some days it does. Watching chirometrics thrive while our tech slowly dissolves into the background noise of Silicon Valley's forgotten companies. Yeah, it's satisfying. But the real vindication, it's the quiet moments. It's watching my team brainstorm at 8 p.m. on a Friday not because they have to, but because they want to. It's reading emails from young engineers who say they finally feel seen. Seeing our clients trust us, not just because of the product, but because of the people behind it. It's knowing that we're building something that matters. Something rooted in respect, not fear. In collaboration, not control. In authenticity, not image. I think a lot about legacy now. About what it means to pass something on. My father tried to pass on a company. But what I needed, what I fought to build, was a culture. A way of working. A way of leading. One that doesn't silence the people who carry the heaviest weight. One that rewards truth over politics. One that understands that being just the COO is actually being the spine of everything. Because in the end, titles don't build companies. People do. And sometimes the quiet ones. The ones doing the work while others talk. They're the ones carrying the future on their backs. So if you're watching this and you've ever been told you're just something, just the assistant, just the intern, just the engineer, just the support staff, I want you to remember something. Just is how they keep you small. It's how they keep you obedient, grateful, silent. Don't be silent. Ask for credit. Take up space. Walk out when they clip your wings. Build your own table if they won't give you a seat. And when they try to shame you for wanting more, for demanding recognition, for refusing to disappear into their comfort, look them in the eye and say what I said. I wasn't just the COO. I was the builder. I was the architect. I was the and engine. And now I'm the empire. If you're still sitting there thinking about everything that just happened, about a son who was overlooked, sidelined, called just the COO, yet stood up, took back what was his, and built an entire empire from the ashes, then take a second and ask yourself, did this story make you feel something? Did it remind you of a time you were underestimated? Time someone took credit for your work? A time you wondered if you were living in someone else's shadow? If it did, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, remembered, and passed on, then don't click away without doing something small that makes a big difference. Hit that like button. Let the algorithm know this wasn't just entertainment. It was a lesson. Wake-up call. A voice for the people working behind the scenes who are quietly building greatness while others take the spotlight. And if you want more stories like this, stories of betrayal, resilience, and people who rise after being written off, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Here at Judgy Tales, we don't just share drama. We dig deep into the kind of real-life decisions that leave you wondering, what would I have done if it were me? Because every week, we bring you powerful, controversial, and emotional stories that challenge your perspective and make you feel something real. Anger, empathy, pride, and maybe even a little fire in your chest to change your own life. If you want to keep experiencing stories that make you think, stories that start conversations, stories that expose truths most people are too afraid to say out loud, be a part of this community. 1 like, 1 subscribe, 1 bell. Just a few seconds of your time, but it ensures you never miss a story that just might change the way you see yourself, or the people around you. Ear listen. Balance scale judge. Beach balloon share your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Judgy Tale.